Hey everyone! Did you know that 64% of people say their relationships suffer because of small behaviors they didn't even realize were harmful? That's right, tiny, sneaky actions that seem harmless could be quietly ruining the foundation of your closest relationships. Are you doing them? Stick around and let's find out together. Today we're diving into the unintentional habits that might be sabotaging your relationships without you even realizing it. These behaviors fly under the radar, quietly chipping away at the connections that mean the most to us. And look, nobody sets out to self-sabotage, but in a world that's moving fast, filled with texts, emails, and endless responsibilities, sometimes we slip into behaviors that aren't exactly relationship friendly. Relationships need care, communication, and respect to thrive. We all know this, but over time, subtle habits, things we barely think about, can creep in and take us from happy couple or best friends to barely speaking or constantly bickering. From taking each other for granted to slowly letting empathy fall by the wayside. These relationship killers can be hard to catch. And when you don't catch them, you can end up with misunderstandings, resentment, or worst of all, a drifting apart. So let's talk about what these sneaky habits look like, why we fall into them, and how we can make a change before they do real damage. All right, let's get into it. The first big relationship killer is neglecting active listening. This is when you're listening but already thinking about what you're going to say next. Or worse, tuning out entirely. And sure, everyone does it now and then. But when it becomes a pattern, it's like saying, I'm here physically, but mentally I'm somewhere else. Active listening means giving the other person your full attention, truly understanding their perspective, and responding in a way that makes them feel heard. Next up, we have taking each other for granted. When we've been in a relationship for a while, we can start to assume our partner, friend, or family member will just be there. So we forget to say thank you, to compliment, to appreciate. Imagine going to work every day and never getting a single acknowledgement. That's what it feels like when we start to take people for granted. Those little thank yous and I appreciate you are the fuel that keep relationships going. Another silent killer? Constant criticism. Now, there's a big difference between giving constructive feedback and consistently pointing out every tiny flaw. When you nitpick, it feels like you're highlighting everything the person is doing wrong rather than supporting who they are. If you notice yourself doing this, try to switch the focus to encouragement and appreciation. A compliment sandwich, positive, critique, positive, can go a long way in keeping criticism from taking over. Let's talk about withholding affection or praise. Sometimes we do this without even realizing it, especially when we're stressed or going through a rough patch. But regularly holding back on affection sends a message that something is wrong, even if we don't intend it. Affection and praise are huge for relationship health. They help reinforce that connection, that sense of partnership. So instead of waiting for a reason to show love or appreciation, just go ahead and do it regularly. Assuming the worst is another bad habit that's easy to slip into. This happens when, instead of giving the benefit of the doubt, you jump straight to a negative conclusion. For example, your partner's running late, and instead of thinking, oh, maybe they're caught in traffic, your mind goes, they don't respect my time. When we assume the worst, we're basically pre-programming ourselves for conflict. Changing this habit starts with giving the people in your life the same benefit of the doubt you'd hope they'd give you. And here's a big one. not setting boundaries. A lot of people hear boundaries and think it's a negative or restrictive thing. But healthy boundaries actually allow relationships to flourish by setting clear expectations. When you don't set boundaries, you can start to feel resentful, even though the other person might not even know they've crossed a line. Remember, boundaries are just guardrails. They're what keep us on the right track in our relationships. Lastly, we have avoiding difficult conversations. No one enjoys conflict, but when you continuously avoid talking about issues, you're essentially piling up tiny relationship landmines. These little bombs will eventually go off and turn into a huge issue. Facing tough conversations head-on may feel uncomfortable in the moment, but it saves you from a blow-up later on. And honestly, if handled with respect, difficult conversations can actually strengthen a relationship. Here's where it all clicked for me. I remember a friend telling me about how her relationship slowly deteriorated because of these little things. She said, "One day we just stopped feeling like partners. I didn't even know how it happened until I realized it wasn't one big thing. It was 1,000 tiny things." And that's the scary part, right? It's not usually some dramatic breakup moment. It's those everyday habits that add up and lead to disconnect. The good news? Once you become aware of them, you have the power to change. Awareness is the first step toward improvement, and often, even small changes can create a massive impact over time. So let's recap the silent killers we talked about: neglecting active listening, taking each other for granted, constant criticism, withholding affection, assuming the worst, not setting boundaries, and avoiding tough conversations. These might seem small on their own, but they build up to create disconnection and resentment over time. By working on these areas, you can strengthen your connections, bring back that spark, and experience a deeper sense of partnership and understanding. Have you noticed any of these silent relationship killers creeping into your own relationships? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're interested in more ways to improve your relationships, check out my other videos on communication and personal growth. Remember, healthy relationships don't just happen. They're built one small action at a time. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And as always, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.